T-Wolves beat the Pistons 124-117 and extend the conference lead to 2.5 games in the West. I got Wolves expert Jack Borman. He's going to help us break it all down. It's all coming up next on the Locked On Wolves POSTCAST.
You are Locked On Wolves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Minnesota on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up? What's up? Back in the lab, back at it. Another T-Wolves POSTCAST episode right here on the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. You got myself, Luke Inman, at Luke_Spinman. That's the man, Jack Borman, on Twitter, at JRBorman13. And before we get into all the action, quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Right now, new customers, you're getting $150 in bonus bets with any $5 bet. $150 when you bet just $5. Check it out. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, man. So, hey, everyone was pumped to get into this kind of soft schedule now after that brutal stretch in December. So tonight, you traveled to Detroit, taking on literally the worst team in the NBA by a wide margin. In fact, 4-36 coming in. Worst start in NBA history through 40 games. But, you know, the big bugaboo with a game like this, these were the games they always struggled with last year. You know, the ones on paper that should have been gimmies, 6-10 last year versus the bottom 5 teams in the NBA. This year, though, 4-0 versus the bottom 5 teams and 11-2 versus the teams that were sub 500. So, starting to maybe shake that narrative, although even with the dub tonight, and we'll get into it all, but things may be a little closer on the scoreboard than maybe you would have hoped early on. Nonetheless, just start us off with your big A-topic takeaway. And I guess what a win like this versus a team like that means for the Wolves as they extend their lead in the West to 2.5 games.
Yeah, I think it was really great to finally see, the Timberwolves get really consistent scoring from, just more than Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards. I think for them to be able to get, such consistent scoring from, Jaden McDaniels, who had a season high 23 points tonight, and Rudy Gobert also, who had, 19 points and had, 10, 12 points in pretty short order there in the first quarter, just from his activity hanging out around the rim, which was awesome. And so I think to have all 4 of those guys playing as well as they did, they scored 96 of the Timberwolves' 124 points. They shot 57%. They made 36 of their 63 combined shots, including 11 of their 17 3-point attempts, of course, highlighted by Karl Anthony Towns going 5 of 5 from deep. But everyone else kind of struggled in this one. 28 points on 30 shots for the other, 7 players that played beyond those 4, and 4 of 13 from 3. So, it's again another night where you don't really get a whole lot of scoring out of the bench, which is something that you'd certainly like to see. And we'll talk a little bit about that, later on. But I just thought the way that they came out, offensively, I thought their process was excellent. When you look at the first quarter, specifically, the fact that they were able to score 28 points in the paint, I believe that's their most in any quarter this season, by 4 points, which was really great. But I think, it just takes a lot of pressure off of Anthony Edwards, especially when other guys are getting into the game early. We saw Jaden McDaniels have a couple of, really strong takes to the basket in that first quarter, which was undoubtedly really helpful to kind of get him into a rhythm. But Rudy Gobert's activity in the first half, really just leaped out. I had 12 points, 4 rebounds, made a ton of defensive rebounds, really difficult for the Pistons, which is what you want. And even though their defense wasn't necessarily there, I think just really focusing in on those 4 guys playing as well as they did was really, really something. And I think for those guys to combine for 61 points in a half, you'll take that every single day. And in that first half, especially, what is it here? They had an offensive rating of about 135, which was, I think, their 3rd best in any first half this season. So, and for them to score 42 points in the paint in the first half, pretty much with all of those guys being the ones to do it, it was just a really, really encouraging sign for them to have a really strong, business-like approach on the offensive end of the floor, which is obviously super helpful for a team that's looking to find some of its offensive rhythm. And like you said, they're hitting a soft spot in the schedule where they do play a lot of really poor defensive teams. That they'll have a great chance to kind of find and catch a rhythm against here coming up in the next few weeks.
Yeah, let's jump into a little bit more individual performances and a couple that really stood out. I mean, you mentioned it already. It was the big four: Ant, Cat, Rudy, Jaden. They helped carry the way for the most part tonight. And you already said it. I got to say it again because this is unbelievable. 96 points combined out of the 124 total points tonight. That's just insane. So let's just do this. Give me like a quick 60 seconds on each one, maybe a quick little breakdown of what you saw tonight, and then finish off with like a grading score of 1 to 10, 10 being a all-star performance tonight, 1 being an absolute dumpster fire. We can start with Cat. I know you already touched on him, but I know you texted me earlier in the first half how impressed you were with not just the scoring, but the passing specifically from the top of the key. What'd you see from him tonight and his 27 points, 6 boards, 4 assists?
Yeah, I thought that, again, it was one of those games where Carl really used kind of his 3-point shot to get everything else going. Another day of him kind of playing in that short corner, deep slot area while he was out there with the other starters and made his first 2 threes, which then became his first 3 threes, his first 4, and then finished the game 5 of 5.
Mm-hmm.
And then the defense really started to kind of stretch out to him and extended the 3-point line. And when that happened, it opened up cutting lanes for other people like Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Gobert, Kyle Anderson, and Carl did a great job of just making simple passes. He didn't try to, do anything crazy. Didn't try to throw an entry pass into double coverage or anything like that. Just made really simple reads and made quick decisions all night long. And so I think anytime Karl Anthony Towns is making quick decisions, good things tend to happen. And that really manifested itself by the way of a 10 of 17 shooting night. 5 of 5 from deep, and had 4 assists to only 1 turnover. That 1 turnover is probably most indicative of his quick decision making. I mean, as far as Carl games go, that's probably like an 8 out of 10, just because we've seen him get 60 in a game. Because you maybe leave that being like the 10, since that's kind of Carl's apex. But yeah, definitely one of his better games this season.
Yeah, how about Rudy? 19 points, 16 boards, 1 block. He continues to just be dominant, man, and continues to get to the free throw line. Okay, 4 at the stripe tonight, but they had a little pregame segment. If you watched Marty tonight in the pregame, teams are starting to do a little hack-a-shack on him. At least it was, that was the story last game as well. But just overall thoughts on Rudy Gobert tonight.
Yeah, I think for Rudy, the biggest thing for me is just like the approach that he takes in some of these games against against weaker defenses, especially in the interior. Like I really like Jalen Duren as a player.
Yeah,
I think he's going to be an awesome center in this league for a long time. But I think the intensity that he just brings from the get-go, I think does a really good job of setting the tone against some of these inferior teams. We saw it against Portland last Friday, Target Center, and he brought it again tonight. And I think the more that he's able to just impose his will and kind of gain a sense of confidence on the offensive end of the floor, I think it just kind of permeates every other part of his game. And with that, the hack-a-shacking, I guess, if you will, I think the more that he's able to kind of score and see the ball go through the hoop a few times early on, like the more confident he's going to feel at the free throw line. And tonight only had 4 free throw attempts, but made 3 of those 4 and was just really active. I mean, he had 5 offensive rebounds, but he probably made 10 other defensive rebounds that the Pistons had, like really difficult.
Yep. Right.
And as a result of making it difficult, probably prevented some transition opportunities. So really good game from Rudy. Another, high teens rebound and points game. I'd probably give him like, again, an 8 or a 9 out of 10.
Defensively, is he doing an even better job protecting the mid-range and the perimeter than he ever did in Utah, which is insane because, all right, 3-time defensive player of the year, while still, of course, being, one of the best rim protectors as well, because I went back and just watched some of that Clippers game again. Westbrook, Paul George, Harden, just so fun to watch him do what he does best, man. I mean, he's just playing so good right now.
Yeah, I think that when he was in Utah, he wasn't really surrounded by the greatest defenders.
Okay.
I think that's putting it pretty kindly.
Mm-hmm.
And now that he's in Minnesota, like obviously we all know what Jaden McDaniels can do. We know what Anthony Edwards can do. But Mike Conley and Karl Anthony Towns are much better off-ball defenders than I think they get credit for. And just the overall length that the Timberwolves have, I think makes it a lot tougher for other teams to operate kind of when Rudy is out of the paint. And then when Rudy gets switched out onto the perimeter in the mid range, I think you just trust that guys are going to rotate behind him. And I think, when you see that trust is kind of there, you just see a more confident Rudy who kind of steps up to guard guys in the mid range or on the perimeter and feels more comfortable switching, all those types of things. So I think it allows them to be more aggressive and try to dictate things rather than constantly being concerned that if I have to step out, that nobody's going to have my back, if that makes sense. Like you probably felt in Utah.
Definitely. How about Ant? 27 points, 8 assists, 5 boards, and 1 absolute Sports Center top 10 slam dunk, man. By the way, I absolutely love the thing that the bench does now, just pointing at the guy who got dunked on. I absolutely love it. You can tell they're just having fun right now, but your overall thoughts on Ant, maybe a 1 to 10 score.
Yeah, I think for Ant, what I really liked was that, he tried to get into the paint early and often. And that's been another theme with him really in the last 3 or 4 weeks since Christmas, I guess, when his free throws really started to take an uptick. And again, only got to the free throw line 4 times tonight. But when you look at his shot chart, so much of the work that he did was in the painted area, which is exactly what you want from someone like him. And then, when that starts to happen and the defense kind of starts to load up on him and, kind of play in the gaps and try to take away some of what he's able to do on the drive, then that really opens up his ability to make things easy for other people. And that's where you see the assists come into play tonight. And I thought that, Ant did an excellent job of, not trying to overcomplicate things and not trying to play hero ball on the drive. I thought that he did a good job, finding his teammates. And I think when you see that 8 assist mark, you'll take that every day of the week, especially when, Mike Conley is right there with him with 7. So I think, the more that Ant is able to get comfortable making plays for others as a result of getting downhill and getting into the paint early, I think that's what you want. But I think the tough part from Ant was that he really just kind of settled and chucked in the third quarter, got really ISO heavy. And that's kind of what allowed Detroit to kind of get some rhythm offensively, get back in the game. He was 3 of 10 in the third quarter, only 8 points. And most of those shot attempts came outside of the paint when he was just kind of holding the ball and dribbling for a while. So I'd probably give Ant, a 6.5 or a 7, just because I think, for him, what he's capable of is obviously incredible, but he has to try to stop, letting these having these 1 quarter lapses where, everything that he's worked so hard to improve kind of just backslides for a stretch. And the thing, and the double-sided sword, I guess, with Ant is just like, when he's really good, it's obviously amazing for the Timberwolves and he really impacts winning. But when, he still kind of keeps that same usage, but is doing, things that you don't want him to be doing, it has a pretty negative impact. So the great news for the Wolves obviously is, more overwhelming majority of it has been positive. So you'll live with some of these things, but it's just some things on the margins that he can clean up that probably would have resulted in him, having 32, 33 points and maybe 10 assists instead of, an inefficient 27 points on 24 shots.
Yeah. And then Jaden to round out the big 4, 23 points, 2 boards, 0 assists. But I'm more curious about your thoughts as far as the bench goes. I mean, what'd you see from them as a whole? Who really stuck out to you the most? And maybe, again, 1 to 10 scoring assessment from that bench that, again, is a lot of people have been highly critical of. And obviously, again, we'll talk more and more the closer the trade deadline approaches. But just your thoughts on that bench tonight, who, again, didn't add a ton, but was there one guy that kind of stuck out a little bit more than everybody else?
Yeah, just a quick note on Jaden. Season high 23 points, had a couple of really tough isolation contested step backs. So the talent is there. The scoring production is there. They just need to find ways to get it out of him. But with the bench,
we don't have time to go on a super long tangent. I'm just curious though, a guy that size, what's the deal with only 1 or 2 boards a night? I just like explain it to me. A
lot of it comes from him spending so much time on the perimeter guarding guys. It's like, most times you'd think a point guard would spend time guarding on the perimeter, but it's Jaden a lot of the time. I mean, he certainly can do more than I think it should be around 4.5, but you can't expect him to get 8-9 rebounds, especially when you're playing 2 centers.
For sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, yeah, from the bench, especially, I think this is one where you could tell that Naz really wanted to make an impact on this one, and he felt that because everyone else was getting into the paint, the Timberwolves were, having their way on the inside, that he wanted to as well, but just didn't get shots to drop, and just didn't quite have that same rhythm. 9 points on 9 shots is pretty un-Naz like. But he did make up for it. I mean, 3 steals. He was really active defensively and had a couple of really nice transition reps defensively. But Nickeil Alexander-Walker was the main story to me. The way that he came in that second half, all 7 of his points were in the second half, had 4 huge points when Detroit kind of got it back to within 3 there late in the third quarter, and then had a nice steal on an entry pass down on the right block, and then in the fourth quarter had an awesome, kind of strip of a offensive player on the way up that then resulted in him making an extra pass at the top of the key to Naz Reid for a 3 that I think helped get the game up to 19, which was their 17, which was their largest lead of the game, and they just kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit from there. But I think Nickeil's has been on a heater since that fourth quarter of the Boston game.
Yeah.
And if not for him, like, I think it probably would have been like a C+ bench game, but he really turned it around. And again, I think the great thing about this bench unit is that even when they're not scoring, they generally do find a way to impact the game defensively. And the nice thing from this bench unit, I mean, they had 11 of the team's 32 assists, led by 9 from Kyle Anderson, which was obviously what you want to see. But I think you just wish that you could get more than, 15 points on, what is it? 8 of 21 shooting. I think you'd like to see better than that from your 3 main bench guys. But yeah, I think, again, solid bench game. I'd probably give it a B- or a B from them. You'd expect kind of that Detroit would be able to outscore them off the bench just with some of the guys that they've got coming off the bench. But yeah, I think fans can't really underrate the defense that you get from Na and slow-mo, and then nights like tonight when Naz is really active. So I think more defensive than offensive tonight, but still enough to to feel pretty positive about them for the most part.
Yeah, a lot of good points there. The bench, you look at the box score the next morning in the paper, it's like, whoa, all right, kind of weak, but a lot of good points you just laid out there as far as the defense and then the assists and a few other things. So glad you touched on that. All right, plenty more deep dive from this one, including the Wolves' defensive performance, right after a quick word from BetterHelp. What are some things you want to keep the same about yourself or about your life in 2024? Where are you already crushing it? Maybe start thinking the opposite of new year, new you, and try ditching all the New Year's resolutions and start expanding on what you already do right. Maybe that's organizing the closet or the garage. I know that's something that I always struggle with. Maybe you take those daily vitamins and stay healthy during the new year, and now you're looking to take it to the next step. Well, therapy can help you find your best strengths and maximize your own specific skill set so you can finally ditch the extreme resolutions. Instead, therapy can help you make changes that really stick over the long term once and for all. If you've been thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's an entirely online, and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited for your time frame. And it's so easy. All you got to do, fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time at no additional charge. It's time to start celebrating the progress you've already made. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Let's pick things up, defensive side of things here, because it really felt like they started to clamp down tonight after that first quarter, didn't it? Like the paint play got a little bit better. They did a good job of not fouling. And once they were able to finally, I think, slow things down, play the half-court game that they love to do, everything started to come together slowly but surely. Biggest storyline takeaways on the defensive side of things. And let's stick with the 1 to 10 theme with your maybe final scoring grade from them tonight.
Yeah, I think, it all kind of started in the paint for the Timberwolves. They gave up 22 points in the paint in the first half, which, was, I think, their second worst first quarter and tied for their third worst quarter this whole entire season in that department. And it was because, I think the Pistons were 9 of 9 at the rim in the first quarter. In the rest of the game, they were just 10 of 17. So I obviously, still shooting 73% at the rim is not what you want. But I still think that the Timberwolves did a good job of at least forcing the Pistons to take their shots from other areas. And, like I wrote in my preview over at Canis for this game, the Pistons are the second worst jump shooting team in the league in terms of points per shot on their jumpers. And the Timberwolves are remain undefeated now against teams that are in the bottom 12 in that department, just because their defense does such a good job of, keeping opposing teams out of the paint and, forcing them to shoot, or keeping them away from the rim, really, or giving them tough rim attempts and forcing them to instead take shots from the mid-range area, where they're, one of the, three best defenses in that short mid-range area, and then they're the best defense in the league in that long mid-range area. So I think that the fact that the Timberwolves were able to, do a better job of forcing shots further away from the rim in the final three quarters. I believe they only allowed, 28 points in the paint for the rest of the game after that first quarter. So, and most of that came with Jaden Ivey, who is one of the best athletes in the entire NBA, just blowing past guys and getting to the rim and making some really, really tough finishes, beyond or, around or above Rudy Gobert. And you'll shake his hand when that happens for sure, just because there aren't that many guys in general that can stay with Jaden Ivey. So, I think, again, it was a situation where the Pistons came into this game second worst offensive rating in the half court. The Wolves did, I thought, a fairly good job after, a 40-point first quarter. I think you'll take them, only scoring 77 in the final three. And again, like a 117 offensive rating for the Pistons. The league average, I think right now is like 116. Again, like being after that first quarter, I don't know what the offensive rating was in the first quarter, but being able to get it down to league average for the rest of the game is certainly what you want, especially with how many guys got into a rhythm in that first quarter. So,
hey, huge shout out to everyone, by the way, joining us in the comments section, always tuning in, giving your nightly feedback. We always love and appreciate interacting with you guys. This one's from Alan. Just real quick, I thought it was interesting. Should we be concerned they're having trouble putting away teams like the Pistons by 20 to 30 points instead of taking the foot off the gas and letting them back in the game? Again, big theme last year, maybe shaking their narrative a little bit this year, but nonetheless, I think it still creeps up in the back of people's minds. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, again, look, at the end of the day, like, I think, like, in games like this, all the pressure is on the Timberwolves, right? It's kind of like that Packers-Cowboys game. Like, the Packers came into that game with nothing to lose, right? The Pistons are 4-36. What are they going to do? Lose another game? So I think, it just has to, at the end of the day, you just have to win the game. And I think none of these guys care if they win by 7 points or 30 points in some of these contests. But like, again, like the Pistons have been playing better of late. And they've got some dudes that can score offensively. And again, like Monty Williams for most of the season, like wasn't even playing Jaden Ivey really. And he's very clearly extremely talented on the offensive end of the floor. And you see guys like Duren and Stewart, they're capable of scoring, and they've had some injury problems this year too. Like, I'm not making excuses necessarily for this being a 7-point game, but I'm just saying, like, I do think the Pistons are a more talented team than, a 4-37 team now. So no, I'm not really that concerned by it because they are winning these games. And after last season, all we were clamoring for was the team to win these games. And I think, come April 15th or whenever the playoffs start, and if the Timberwolves, are still finding ways to win, but are winning by 8 points instead of 17 points, we're not going to be talking about that. We're just going to be saying, thank God they won enough of those games to, hopefully finish with one of the top 1, 2, 3 seeds so that, we can see home games at Target Center in the playoffs.
Yeah, good question by Alan. And again, thanks everybody in the comments section joining tonight. Hey, did you see Dane Moore's tweet about the high-scoring league we're in all of a sudden? Because he basically mentioned, it's a long tweet, but I'll paraphrase. Basically talked about how the Warriors 73-9 season, aka one of the greatest runs of all time, they had a 114 offensive rating, but now we sit here today, a few years later, the average offensive rating is 116, the average, 2 points higher. So just curious, I don't know if you saw it, but your takeaways. My mind immediately thinks, okay, I'm an NFL guy. The way the rules have changed in the NFL and football so much to favor the offense and the passing game, I know things don't necessarily equate the same apples to apples here. So I'm just curious, I guess, on what exactly happened and how we got here in such a high scoring league all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think analytics has a lot to do with it.
Okay.
In that, I think people were able to do more in-depth studies about, what shots are actually yielding more points. And right, I think especially in the earlier part of the 2010s, there were still a lot more mid-range jump shots going on. And I think that you there?
Yep. Got you.
Sweet. And I think like, with finding out that, a 3-pointer is a much more efficient shot than a long mid-range too, I think it just is kind of changed the, the focus coaches of saying like, hey, let's try to work to get a corner 3 or an above the break 3 rather than, stepping in. Cause I think when we were younger, some of the coaches were teaching us, oh, pump fake and take a dribble in and take a long mid-range 2 instead. Like that's just not, what the math would tell you is the more efficient thing to do. So I think it's just kind of come with, more of a focus for these offenses in creating schemes that can get you shots from the most efficient places on the floor, which are at the rim, the free throw line, and from the corners. And so I think that's probably the biggest reason why, not to mention that, I think all these players coming into the league now, especially in the last, 7, 8, 9 years, whatever it's been, are more skilled and more talented than they have ever been. And that certainly has a lot to do with it. I think the most talented defenders are probably on par with the most talented players in the league that we saw, in the last 15 years, I guess. But it's just so much harder to play deep. Like at a certain point, there's all you can do defensively, right? Like great offense is going to beat great defense more often than not. That's just what the reality is. And, I think that's just the way the league is trending. Right. And it used to be like you used to have one lead dog superstar that could score. And now you have some teams that have 2, like the Wolves have 2 really awesome scorers. So you think about Phoenix, like have 3 guys that are probably in the top 15 in terms of like best scorers in the league. And it's just a lot for defenses to contend with. And, I think that's just kind of a function of talent and math kind of coming together to really put a bind on some of these defenses, not to mention we've gone along and tried to eliminate some of these injuries and things like that. Kind of like football, right? Where there are more rules now to protect the quarterback and enhance offense and some of that stuff where, I think that kind of cuts the legs out of some of these defenses on some nights.
Well said. I could pick your brain about that stuff, the analytics side of things and everything else, the evolution of the game just over the past 6-7 years all night. We'll save that for another episode. I got one more quickie to close, but first, a quick word from FanDuel. Quick reminder, tonight's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Right now, new customers, you're getting $150 in bonus bets when you place any $5 wager. $150 in bonus bets when you throw down just $5 on any bet. You don't even have to win. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, no better time to get in on all the action. The app, so easy to use. And they got everything you need. Money lines, parlays, prop bets, over-unders, you name it. They got it. FanDuel's got everything you need to bet on the entire NBA season. And it's by far the easiest and simplest betting app to use. Go check it out for yourself. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon today. America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel, official partner of the NBA. Last one here, ESPN Power Rankings released today. Wolves back up to 2 behind Boston. But what stuck out to me the most, 4 of the top 6, all from the West. Wolves at 2, Nuggets at 3, OKC, who will play on, what is that, Saturday night? They're at 4. Yep. Mavs at 6. That one kind of surprised me. So a lot of firepower at the top in the West. The Wolves are trying to box out, so to speak. 2.5-game cushion. Relatively easy stretch now with the schedule coming up. What's your hope or maybe realistic expectations for this team and where they stand, knowing what you know about the schedule and everything else by the time we get to the All-Star break? And I guess, too, on top of that, just real quick, what teams in the West are really sticking out to you right now, too, maybe for good or bad?
Yeah, I think obviously, I immediately go to the Clippers, right? Because just the Clippers, I think, have been the second best team in the West behind the Timberwolves. Really,
yeah, they're
for
at
the last
7, by the way. Sorry, they're at 7. So really, 5 of the top 7 teams all in the West. That's crazy.
Yeah, and so I mean, I personally, like, from where it stands right now, like if you made me pick a team to win the West, I would pick the Clippers. Like I just think that's a team that has everything you want on both sides of the ball. But so I'd certainly think about them. But Oklahoma City, you can't discount what they've done in such a kind of taking a huge step forward year for them. I would love for their front office to stop sitting on all these picks and try to start liquidating some of them. Like, I thought Pascal Siakam would have been an awesome fit next to Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You got 3 guys there, and SGA, Williams, and Siakam, who could create their own shot, and are all, pretty big, burlier guys that can play some defense. So
I'm sorry, do they have a lot of early premium picks or something? Or
yeah, well, I mean, they have like 35 first-round picks in the next 7 drafts.
Okay.
From all the tanking that they've done. But yeah, in terms of and then obviously the Nuggets are the Nuggets, and they're going to be there. They're just so consistent, kind of a well-oiled machine at this point. But yeah, I mean, in between now and the All-Star break, the great thing for the Wolves is that you start looking at some of the schedule, and they play Memphis, Charlotte, Washington, Brooklyn, San Antonio, Portland twice, Chicago. Like, those are all teams that they should destroy. And then you work in some of the more competitive games: Oklahoma City twice, Dallas, Orlando, Houston. Those are all teams that they've already played and already beat this season. So you have to feel good about the Wolves, at least. That's a very valid point, Jeff. That's like the main thing for me, is like, if they're healthy. I know we've said that about the Clippers for a while, but they've kind of, unsubscribed from the load management theory and whatever. So yeah, so I think the Timberwolves should at least be bare minimum, like, really competitive in all these games and come out with, what is it, 12, 13 games, at least an 8-5 or, 9-4 record in between now and the All-Star break, just because, I think this team is kind of starting to find its stride again. They're really confident in one another, and, aren't fazed by anybody that they see, which is really important. And just to touch on that one last point about Oklahoma City being scary good, I think Oklahoma City is a team that's really going to struggle in the playoff, because they really don't have any experience beyond SGA playing in the playoffs. And obviously the only real difference between last season and this season, the team that we saw the Wolves absolutely just destroy in the play-in game is Chet Holmgren. And, he's the difference between getting destroyed and winning games and being really competitive in the playoffs. Like, for as good as Jalen Williams is, I don't think he's a good enough number 2 scorer for them to be, as competitive in the playoffs as a number 2 seed right now would suggest, or number 3 seed, whatever they are now. And their bench is pretty thin and pretty inexperienced, and pretty inconsistent from game to game. So I personally think that the Thunder are going to lose pretty much whatever first round series they play in, just because I think some of that stuff will catch up to them. But you absolutely have to, tip your cap to them for what they've been able to do in the regular season, and and take this step forward. Because at the end of the day, like, you got to win games, and if you want your players to develop and grow, and they've certainly done that. And there's a reason why Mark Daigneault is the leader in the clubhouse right now for Coach of the Year.
Well done tonight, as always. Wolves moved to 29-11 on the year, now a 2.5 game lead in the West. Back at home now for 3 straight. Starting tomorrow, Grizzlies tip-off. It's a late one, 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, and OKC right around the corner. That's Saturday night.
Brutal.
As always, huge shout-out to everyone that joined us in the postcast. Always love everyone's feedbacks, the comments, the news, the notes throughout each and every postcast. And you can rest assured we'll be back each and every game, same time, same place, right here to break it all down. Got to go check out all of Jack's work on Twitter at JRBorman13. And you got to check out Jack on the Minnesota basketball party, too, with their guys Sam Ekstrom, Gophers legend Ron Johnson, Carol Evans, Reggie Wilson. That's each and every Wednesday afternoon as well. Brand new episode must have just dropped today. Any teasers for us on what you guys talked about, or any great Ron Johnson one-liners or movie quotes I can look forward to? What do you got?
Ron was on one today, man. I think today was one of those days where you just
is it a day that ends in Y? Okay. Then
Yeah,
Ron was
where you
on
just
one.
need like Sam to be able to mute his mic. But no, he's great.
He's
You know, we
awesome.
did some superlatives of the season to this point, which I thought, you know, was a lot of fun, and talked about that big Clippers one, which is obviously you know, still relevant since I think everyone was kind of expecting the Wolves to coast to a victory tonight. So definitely
Love
go
it.
check that out.
Love it. Can't wait to go check that out. Last plug, if you haven't already, Ben Beacon, spitting fire over on the Locked On Wolves podcast each and every day as well. All right, that'll do it for us tonight. He's Jack Borman. I'm Luke Inman on Twitter, @Luke_Spinman. Until next time, signing out.